So for this first post, it's called Possible Kidnapping at the River. Don't go to the river alone. Last 4th of July, my boyfriend and I went to the river with his friend's family. The river was so packed we could barely find a good spot to set up our little grill and chairs. We stayed for a few hours and had a good time. It wasn't until we were ready to leave that one of the creepiest encounters of my life happened. I don't know what else to call it besides a possible kidnapping or trafficking situation. For context, I live in Arizona. My boyfriend, his friend's dad, and I were outside packing up one of the cars. His friend's niece sat in the car. My boyfriend's friend's mom and his sister had driven separately and sat in their car beside us. 2 men drove up and parked right next to their vehicle. It was already a bit weird that he parked right next to us because there were quite a few available parking spots. The man rolled down his window and I immediately recognized a man who was smiling the biggest smile at me an hour or so earlier while he was tubing down the river. At first I didn't think anything of it, but looking back, the smile felt so creepy. The man didn't say anything substantial, he just asked for directions or something and rolled his window back up and stayed parked next to us, to our friend's mom and sister. We finished packing up and were about to head out. Everyone was sitting in the car at that point. Our friend's mom and sister backed up and started to leave, and the 2 men immediately followed after them. This few-minute time spent literally had my eyes watering up. I'm so afraid to think what potentially could have happened. When the 2 men drove off, a white van parked further back in the parking lot followed right after them. At this point, they still had not left the parking lot. My boyfriend's friend told his dad, "Call mom," and so he did. Everyone was taking the situation seriously. Whether or not it was a dangerous situation is impossible to tell, but I'm glad we treated it like one. As the friend's dad called his wife, we all stepped out of the car and watched all 3 vehicles from across the lot. I was terrified they would drive off, especially because reception is shoddy in the area. Thankfully, they picked up the phone right away. We could see them parked at the edge of the parking lot's exit, about to drive off. Our friend's dad just told them to come back. His tone was unusually serious and only made the situation much more anxiety-inducing. When they did a U-turn, so did the men's car. But I think when the 2 men saw all of us outside on the car on alert, they decided to leave. Both the 2 men and the white van left at the same time, apparently while the mom and sister were parked. The 2 men tried to speak to them and ask for directions again or something. I don't think they knew exactly what was said either. Parts of me doubt anyone would try to pull something on July 4th, probably one of the busiest days at the river, and one of the days cops are out the most. But this is still one of the creepiest encounters of my life, and I'm hoping someone can make more sense of this for me. And a lot of the comments are pretty divided on what this could have been. Some people saying that this would be the perfect opportunity for abductions, given it's such a busy day of the year. Quote, "From the way you describe it, it seems possible. Good thing that everyone handled it the way they did. Congrats for sticking together and taking such things seriously. Try reading The Gift of Fear by Gavin DeBecker, and you will see how important and usually right your gut feelings are." But the majority of people are saying that this was super sketchy and they are extremely glad that they made it out safe. This next story was posted onto r/letsnotmeet and is called "Man Claimed He Was From the Police." This is a story that pops back up in my mind from time to time. I've only told it to a few people, but I definitely feel like it deserves its place here. It's for sure one of the scariest moments I've ever had as a child. Back when I was around 10 years old, my mom finally decided that it was time for her to start taking her driver's license. When she began taking lessons, she was struggling a lot. For that reason, my dad decided he wanted to do some practices with her besides the official driving lessons with her instructor, just to make sure that she'd pass the upcoming test first try. My little brother and I were attending swimming lessons at this nearby university at the time. Behind a forested area near the university lays this huge student parking lot area surrounded by trees, which turned out to be basically empty every weekend. So my dad saw this as an opportunity to take my mom here to drive around for a bit, and brought my little brother and I with them since we were too young to stay home alone. We brought a football with us. When we arrived to the parking lot later on in the evening, my parents began their practice. My little brother and I quickly got bored though and asked if we could go over to this little grassy field that was on the other side of the parking lot to play some football. My parents let us since they'd always be able to keep their eyes on us while they were driving around. After playing for some time, my parents ended up driving in the other end of the parking lot. They were approximately 300 to 400 meters away from my brother and I. Suddenly, this white Toyota pulls up into the parking lot. We were playing right there at the exit/entrance. The car turns around and stops on my right side with the vehicle facing the exit. The driver rolls down his windows and presents himself as Thomas. He looked friendly, was good looking, and young. I would guess he was around 30. This is where things started to get weird. On the passenger seat, there was a woman covering her face with a newspaper. All I could see was long blonde hair, and on the back seat was a baby sat in a baby chair. Thomas immediately states that he's from the police, and that we have to get in the car immediately as he has to talk to us. My brother actually took 2 steps towards the vehicle, but I stuck my arm in front of his chest as I was sensing something was off. The woman was still covering her face at this point, not saying a word. Thomas then raised his voice and told us again to get in the car, or else he'd come out and get us. My brother and I froze in fear. Suddenly, the woman put down the newspaper, showed her face, and told us in the most calm, motherly voice, "Just listen to the man." The woman looked young, pretty, and like a person who wouldn't hurt a fly. At this moment, I began screaming as loud as I could. What we hadn't seen at that point was my dad had already been running as fast as he could toward us. He was coming from behind the vehicle, so we couldn't see him. My parents didn't have time to drive us since the road down the parking lot was twisted all the way. When my dad heard my scream, he started yelling as loud as he could, "Hey, who the F are you? Get the F away from my children." As soon as Thomas heard my dad and realized my brother and I weren't alone, he threw his car into gear and took off as fast as he could. He most definitely looked like a person who pissed himself when he saw my dad. My dad was furious and told my brother and I to hurry back to the car. He didn't even think about calling the police at that point. He just wanted to beat up the guy himself. That resulted in us driving around for the next hour trying to find him, before my dad cooled down and decided that he should probably just call the police. We never found out who these people were, but this episode taught me to never judge a book by its cover. People can be the most friendly looking people in the world and still wish evil upon you or the ones you love. I'm not sure what these people would have done to us, but I am sure about one thing. They definitely weren't from the police. And there is a comment on this post that I did want to include here that reads, "Sounds to me like you two very narrowly avoided being kidnapped. Thank God your dad heard your screams and was already hightailing it towards you and your potential abductors. I shudder to think what could have or would have happened if you didn't react instinctively by screaming, or if you hadn't put your arm around to stop your brother, or if your dad wasn't as fast a runner to immediately jump into action upon hearing your yells, etc. Glad you made it out of that scary and insane situation." There's also this other comment on the post that says, this may be a strange thought, but are you convinced the baby in the back was real, and not one of those very realistic dolls? Just thinking of people who put mannequins in their passenger seats to cheat in carpool lanes. What if the baby was a mannequin to trick children into letting their guard down? Or maybe I'm just being paranoid. This next story was posted onto r/paranormal, called "Use the Ouija board with my girlfriend and her brother came through." This story also does contain instances of unalive, so I do want to put that disclaimer here, so do feel free to skip this story. I had a very unsettling but nice experience with my girlfriend. It was just me and her. Her brother, who unalived himself, showed up. We asked who was with us, and the pointer spelled his name. M, short for a longer name. I asked how old M was. M said 17. That's how old he was when he unalived. Things got heavy in the room. I wasn't sure if this was really happening. I got nervous and said, "Well, nice to meet you, man. Sorry it's through such a weird circumstance. I'm your girlfriend's boyfriend." The pointer spelled out, hi. Then very quickly the pointer went directly to Y and then Dad. My girlfriend's dad also passed away a few months ago. This gave me the absolute chills. It was like he was asking why did he unalive. We asked him if he was in the spirit realm on Earth, and he said no. We then asked if he was somewhere outside of Earth that's a nice place, and he pointed to yes. We asked if he was with his dad, and the pointer said no. We asked if he was somewhere else, like a heaven, and he pointed yes. I asked if there was anything he wanted to say. The pointer spelled out, "I'm sorry." The pointer after that went EB okay. E is the name of my girlfriend's brother, and B is my girlfriend. My girlfriend asked if he was asking if her and her brother were okay, and it went to yes. She was crying, and so was I. She said she was okay. I asked if there was anything else he wanted to say. He spelled out, "I'm sorry," one last time, and then went to goodbye. This last story is called I Used to Follow People for Work, posted on the r/Let's Not Meet. I used to be a surveillance investigator for insurance claims, work, injury stuff, to see if people who claimed to be hurt at work and were collecting free money were actually not injured. I did this full time for about 10 years, doing a new case every few days for 10 years. You see a lot of weird stuff. For example, one time I saw DRUG dealers in a downtown city literally riding horseback. You see scary stuff too, obviously in bad neighborhoods, etc. Scariest encounter went down about 20 years ago. This was a case in a somewhat rural area, which were always the toughest. You get there at 6 a.m. to see what cars are in the vicinity and run plates to see if they match the person. Then mostly you watch the registered vehicle to depart if you found one. This place had one car in the driveway with no plates, which was actually quite unusual. You're also provided an age, height, weight of a person, and in rare cases, a picture. So I knew this was a guy in his mid-30s, average height, and weight. First day, it turned out that he left before I got there. Protocol is if you can't confirm they are home by 10 a.m., 4 hours on site, you literally need to knock on their door to confirm if they are home. You usually pretend to be a UPS delivery in a costume and a dollar store item in an envelope with a clipboard. Surprisingly, that works. Anyways, no one was home. Second day came back at 5 a.m., and lo and behold, a second vehicle was there. A truck. Also with no plates. The dude came out around 5:30 a.m. and left. I followed him, but he was immediately wise and knew he was being followed, which usually means they're up to no good. Working while collecting insurance disability money, aka insurance fraud. I let him go while trying to be discreet about it. I came back the third day in another car, which you also sometimes had to do. This time he left again early, and I successfully followed him to a farm in the neighboring rural hills. In short, I busted him on video, doing heavy farm work for several hours. He eventually caught on and realized he was being watched. I took off from my parked position and thought there was no way he could have suddenly get off his tractor, run to his truck, and get to me as there were driveways etc. between us and also a creek. But then suddenly he was on me in his truck in some scary rural mountain roads. I was scared shitless and kept driving, and somehow I made it to the freeway. I'd literally been lost in the mountains. On the freeway he followed me for miles and I couldn't shake him. He would pull beside me at times and flex his arms and gesture to pull over. Dude was pretty scary looking, and I had evidence on him that would cost him in more ways than one. I called 911 and reported a drunk driver endangering me, but was surprisingly told the officers were in between shifts and couldn't help. There was an easy pass bridge about 20 miles up if I got that far, and at first I thought I could lose him there if he didn't have the easy pass. But then realized again he had no plates, so it wouldn't matter. Anyways, after many miles I was finally able to shake him, but he remained pretty close behind. I exited the freeway and found a gas station, and thankfully a cop was there, and I reported this guy and his truck. The cop made a call and I didn't see this guy pull up. Shortly thereafter I gassed up my car and left and drove home and submitted my report. I'm sure his free insurance money ended at the very least. Scariest part actually is that I was worried this guy had my license plate and could somehow run it, and could run it somehow, as I was able to do for work, and locate where I live. I began to research him online. Sometimes in that line of work, you learn that the potential insurance fraud of the person you are following is the least of their criminal endeavors. Well, I learned that this guy was a hardcore convicted felon who had been in federal prisons and was a gang member, and a hardcore DRUG user and dealer. I was scared, but nothing happened over the next few years, and I eventually forgot about it. But about 5 years later or so, I had a case in the same rural area again and thought about this guy. I wanted to Google him to see what the police blotters revealed about him in the last few years. I Googled him and discovered he had actually passed away. I learned that a couple years prior, he had taken his girlfriend hostage with a GUN, and did someone who tried to help her, then was unalived himself by another person who actually did save her. Don't need to worry about meeting him again. And yeah, that pretty much does it for this video. Please feel free to let me know your thoughts on these posts, and I'll see you in the next one.